All right, so first off, all praise to Yahweh, in the name of His Son, Yahweh Shai, in the name of the Holy Spirit. And double honors to my elders, apostles, and the bishops of Great Millstone, otherwise known as GMS for short, but also known as the Prophets of Doom. Now, these are where I have learned this truth and where I am still learning this truth. And also, Shalom to the remnant and the elect of Israel. Lord willing, I am of that number. Now, this video, we're going to go into Revelation chapter 13, starting at the 13th verse. All right, so before we do that, let's go ahead and read from 1, okay, back up to 13. Again, if you are just clicking on this channel, in this video, and you find yourself wondering how we got to this verse, all right, we have videos on this channel, starting at Revelation 13 and verse 1 also. And even before that, we started talking about the beast. So really, this video started at a video titled The Beast, but first Daniel chapter 2. Okay, we went from there and then gradually got to this point. So, Revelation chapter 13, starting at verse 1, it reads, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wandered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" Now, being that we are going over Revelation 13 and 13, and maybe even especially 13 and 13. Okay, keep that in mind. That verse that we just read. Okay, I'll read it again. Revelation 13 and 4. "And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Yahweh Baal Shem Yahweh Shai, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwelt in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given over him, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Verse 13, "And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Okay. So, again, verse 4 stated that people would wonder who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him. So, who can come up against the beast? Okay. This Edomite empire and the power that it's in now. Okay. America, the EU, NATO. Okay. No one can. Okay. They were given the blessing, the fatness of the earth, which they are in the process of gaining. Okay. They were also given the blessing to live by the sword. Okay. And which should explain, okay, who is like unto the beast and who is able to make war with him. Only one is going to take Esau out of power, and that is Yahushua, the Messiah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Right away, two things should come to mind. All right. I'm going to ask Google to summarize these two things. Okay. AI overview. It says in August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima, which was August 6th, and Nagasaki, August 9th, resulting in the obliteration of both cities and causing over 100,000 deaths initially, with many more succumbing to injuries and radiation poisoning over time. The bombings were the first and only use of nuclear weapons in warfare and were a major factor in Japan's unconditional surrender, which ended World War II. All right, goes on to say Hiroshima, date August 6th, 1945. All right, we're talking about making fire come down from the sky. All right, these bombs, these very powerful bombs, which is, okay, bombs, missiles, guns, okay, and actual swords, knives, weapons of war, all right, or just weapons, are this man's blessing, okay? So, Hiroshima, date August 6th, 1945. The bomb was called the Little Boy. It says the impact. It says the shockwave destroyed nearly every structure within a mile of the blast, followed by a firestorm that killed tens of thousands more. By the end of 1945, the death toll was estimated to be over 70,000. As far as Nagasaki, the date was August 9th, 1945. All right, 3 days later. The bomb was called the Fat Man. All right, the impact. It says the bomb was detonated over the city, causing widespread destruction and killing approximately 40,000 people on impact. The total number of deaths, including those from injuries and radiation, reached well over 100,000 by the end of 1945. Aftermath. All right, it says the bombings caused devastating long-term health consequences, including a higher risk of cancer and other radiation-induced illnesses for survivors. The events spurred a global movement to end nuclear weapons testing and warfare. Japan announced its unconditional surrender on August 10th, 1945, 6 days after the Nagasaki bombing, officially ending World War II. Okay, so there's a couple of examples. All right, what I do want to ask, all right, What could be the assessment as far as the global opinion about going to war with America and its allies after these events? See what it says. Man. All right, hold on. I'm gonna have to ask this a different way. All right, let's see. It says in 1945 there was no consensus in Japan to go to war with the U.S. and its allies after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings and Soviet invasion of the Manchuria instead exacerbated a deep division within the Japanese government, ultimately leading to a stalemate that was broken only by the direct intervention of Emperor Hirohito. It says the internal conflict over surrender. It says after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima on August 6th, 1945, and the Soviet Union's declaration of war on Japan on August 8th, the Japanese Supreme Council was deadlocked. This Big Six group, which determined war policy, was split 3-3 on accepting the Potsdam declarations, the terms for surrender. All right, hold on. It's not really what I'm. let's see. Hold on. Okay, I asked what was thought of America causing such devastation, although it was wartime. All right, it says reactions to the U.S. dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 were complex, varied greatly by country and individual perspective, and have shifted significantly over time. While many Allied citizens initially experienced relief that the war was over, the use of a weapon with such unprecedented destructive power also immediately sparked moral and ethical debates that continue today. In the United States, it says in 1945, the vast majority of Americans approved of the bombings. The prevailing view, supported by President Truman, was that the attacks saved Americans' lives by forcing a swift Japanese surrender and avoiding a costly land invasion. As decades passed, American public opinion became more divided. Younger generations, in particular, grew more likely to view the bombings as unjustified. This shift was fueled by greater public awareness of the humanitarian toll, including the long-term effects of radiation exposure, thanks to sources like John Hershey, John Hershey's 1946 account in the New Yorker. Historians and critics increasingly questioned the military's necessity of the bombs, arguing Japan was already near surrender due to a naval blockade, conventional bombing, and the Soviet invasion of Manchuria. Among Allied nations, it says much of the Allied world, exhausted by years of war, shared the American sentiment of relief that the war had finally ended. News of the bombings was seen as a way to hasten victory and avoid further bloodshed, particularly in places that had endured long and brutal campaigns against Japan. Some people in Allied nations that had suffered heavily from Japanese aggression, such as China and parts of Southeast Asia, reportedly felt satisfaction that Japan had been decisively punished for its atrocities. Even at the time, some figures like British Prime Minister Winston Churchill expressed solemn reflection on the long-term implications of this new and terrible weapon. Right, in Japan, it says, for the Japanese, the bombs were an unparalleled catastrophe. Survivors known as hibakusha experienced the immediate horrors of the blast and the long-term suffering from radiation sickness. While the internal Japanese government was already deadlocked on the issue of surrender, Emperor Hirohito's explicit mention of the most cruel bomb helped break the stalemate and justify his decision to surrender. Today, Japanese citizens overwhelmingly see the bombings as unjustified, viewing themselves as victims of a unique tragedy. Only a small percentage of Japanese believe the use of the bombs was warranted. All right, it says international law and ethical considerations. In the decades since, the bombings have been widely debated under the lens of international humanitarian law. Critics argue the international targeting of civilians was a war crime, and that if an Axis power had dropped the bomb first, their leaders would likely have been prosecuted. The atomic bombings took place before many modern protocols regarding the use of such weapons were in effect. International lawyers note that today, such an act would almost certainly be illegal under the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution. Supporters point out that the bombs were used within the context of total war, where strategic bombing of civilian populations was already commonplace. By August 1945, devastating conventional firebombing raids on cities like Tokyo had already caused mass civilian casualties. All right, let me see. How much more powerful are the most powerful of the most devastating? I'll just put that. Most devastating weapons of war today compared to those of 1945. All right, let's see what it says. All right, now check this out. The most devastating weapons today, thermonuclear bombs, are hundreds to thousands of times more powerful than the atomic bombs used in 1945. While modern weapons design has shifted away from the highest possible yields in favor of accuracy, the destructive potential far surpasses the original atomic bombs. Comparison of explosive power. Okay. Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs in 1945. These were fission-based atomic bombs with relatively low yields for nuclear weapons. The bomb on Hiroshima had a yield of about 15 kilotons or 15,000 tons of TNT. The bomb on Nagasaki had a yield of about 21 kilotons or 21,000 tons of TNT. Modern thermonuclear weapons, this is also known as hydrogen or H bombs. These weapons use a fusion reaction, which is far more energetic than the fission-only process of the 1945 bombs. Typically, modern average strategic warheads in the US and Russian arsenals today have yields in range of the 100 to 500 kilotons. This makes them 5 to 30 times more powerful than the 1945 bombs. The largest nuclear bomb currently in the US arsenal, the B-83, has a maximum yield of 1.2 megatons or 1,200 kilotons. This is about 80 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The Soviet Union's Tsar Bomba, tested in 1961, remains the most powerful explosive ever detonated with a yield of 50 megatons. That is approximately 3,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. So it goes in on the shift from sheer size to accuracy. It says during the Cold War, the US and Soviet Union built increasingly larger weapons. However, the focus has shifted over time. As missile guidance systems became more precise, it was no longer necessary to use extremely high-yield warheads to compensate for inaccuracy. It is often more effective to use a missile with multiple smaller warheads or multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles or IRVs than a single massive one. This allows a single missile to destroy several distinct targets, maximizing damage efficiency. A lot of these missiles go up and out into space or high up into the atmosphere, right? And then come back down, right, over their target. So it says weapons larger than several megatons are considered impractical. A single very large bomb can only destroy a city once, whereas multiple smaller, high accuracy warheads can cover a wider area and destroy a greater number of hardened military targets with the same overall explosive power. Okay, this section says factors beyond yield. Comparing sheer explosive power doesn't tell the whole story of a weapon's devastation. Modern nuclear bombs have additional features that make them more lethal. Newer thermonuclear designs can produce more fallout, contaminating wider areas and making them uninhabitable for longer periods. A nuclear blast creates an EMP that can knock out electronics and power grids over a huge radius, causing widespread, long-term infrastructure damage. Some modern warheads are designed to penetrate deep underground before detonating, making them much more effective at destroying reinforced targets like bunkers and missile silos, right, or otherwise called bunker busters. Okay, so this should answer. All right, Revelation 13 and verse 13. He doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Now, I do want to ask one more question. That just made me think of something else. Okay, so let me see. Explain dews. DEWS. Let's see. Let's see what comes up. I just want to see what this. All right, dews. DEWS. All right, so it stands for Directed Energy Weapons, which are systems that use focused electromagnetic energy to disable, damage, or destroy a target. Unlike conventional weapons that use kinetic force from projectiles, DEWs engage targets at the speed of light with a variety of effects, from non-lethal and temporary to permanently destructive. All right, it says how DEWs work. It says directed energy weapons convert electrical or chemical energy into a focused, high-intensity beam of radiated energy. The effects on a target depend on the type of energy used, its power level, and the duration of exposure. All right, primary types of DEWs. It says high energy lasers, or HEL, right? HEL. These weapons fire a concentrated beam of infrared or visible light to physically damage or melt a target. They heat a spot on a target's surface until it fails structurally or its components vaporize. Commonly used to shoot down drones, rockets, artillery, and mortar rounds by burning through their guidance systems or fuel tanks. All right. It says high-powered microwaves, or HPM. It says these weapons emit powerful radio frequency waves that disable or disrupt electronic systems. HPMs generate a powerful electromagnetic pulse that overloads and fries the electronics of a target, effective against swarms of drones, communications arrays, and missile guidance systems because they can affect multiple unshielded targets within a wide beam area. Then it goes on to particle beam weapons. These are largely experimental systems that accelerate particles, like electrons or ions, to near light speed and focus them into a high energy beam. A particle beam is designed to penetrate a target and cause internal, deep level damage by disrupting atomic structures or triggering nuclear reactions. This technology is primarily explored for missile defense and anti satellite operations. Key advantages of DEW's speed of engagement. It says energy travels at the speed of light, making engagement with fast moving targets like missiles almost instantaneous. Unlike expensive interceptor missiles, each firing of a DEW costs a fraction of the price, limited only by the cost of the electricity to power it. Unlike expensive interceptor, hold on. It says as long as there is a power source, a DEW can fire repeatedly without running out of ammunition, giving it a nearly infinite magazine. The effect of a DEW can be tailored from temporary disruption to complete destruction, allowing for a more proportional response. Significant challenges and limitations. It says atmospheric interference. The effectiveness of some DEWs, particularly lasers, is diminished by environmental factors like rain, fog, and smoke, which can scatter the energy beam. Power requirements. It says generating enough power to create a destructive energy beam is a major technical hurdle, especially for smaller mobile platforms. Cooling demands. It says high energy systems produce a massive amount of waste heat, requiring extensive and reliable cooling systems that limit mobility. As far as ethical and health concerns, long-term health effects of directed energy exposure are not fully known. In some applications, like non-lethal dazzlers, raise ethical questions about their potential for causing permanent harm. All right, I'm not going to read that much anymore. I want to talk about a couple things just really quick before we go. All right, there is just like some people may put things in movies that are true, they'll mix some fantasy in there, they'll mix some fiction in there, but they'll also have true things in there, right? And surround it with comedy or, things that sound too futuristic, all right? These are things that sometimes they already have, all right? I say that to say this. I used to play online, all right, a certain game, and they had a DEW in that, all right? They were using a satellite to rain down laser beams on locusts. I'll just say that. I'm not going to say the name of the game, but just thinking about that is pretty wild for me. All right, they destroyed cities uh, using these weapons. Okay, on the game. Okay, so in a real life example, I want to give is before I heard of man, the P tier. All right, we have to start. We have to kind of talking code, right? But before the P tier, which was going to act tray, people that came over here from uh, different places. Okay. Uh, Before that thing was announced, and it mentioned helping track these people and find them. Right. Before I heard of that, there was another piece of technology that I heard of overseas in our land. All right. I'm not going to say the name, but you should know what I'm talking about. Okay. That was named after a color. All right. It was lavender. Okay. You can just look up lavender. And all these things are just when you first hear about them, it's like wow. But then when you combine them with the truth, especially Revelation 13 and verse 13, all right, you start to get a real understanding of what's going on in this world. All right. So that is what these things, all right, are what you should consider when you read Revelation 13 and verse 13. Everything we read here. All right. And I will read that verse one more time before we cut the video. So Revelation 13 and verse 13. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Okay. So I hope this came through as sincere and edifying. And with that, all praise to Yahweh, in the name of his Son, Yahweh Shai, in the name of the Holy Spirit. All right, double honors to my elders, apostles, and the bishops of Great Millstone, otherwise known as GMS for short, but also known as the Prophets of Doom. All right, these are where I have learned this truth, and these are where I am still learning this truth. And also, Shalom to the remnant and the elect of Israel. Lord willing, I am of that number, and Lord willing, we'll see you in the next video. Shalom.